Welcome to Early Research Stories, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories from diverse voices in the world of learning and instruction. Join us as we dive into the latest trends, research breakthroughs, and insights shaping the field today. Hosted by Cris Castro, Rachel Shanks, and Leonie Johan, this is your inside look at the heart of educational research.
Welcome. I am Cris Castro, and we're with Vincent Hoogerheide. Did I pronounce that correct, Vincent?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, thank you. From Utrecht University, the Netherlands. That's also correctly pronounced? No?
So it would be Vincent Hoogerheide with a
Okay.
from
Okay.
Utrecht University.
Okay, two errors. We're not starting very good here. Well, we are with Vincent to discuss his research and life decisions to become a researcher. He's an active early member involved in some SIGs, an interest in multimedia and generative learning, self-regulated learning, and cognitive load theory. Vincent, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here, and I really appreciate it.
So hi, Vincent. I'm Rachel Shanks, and I wondered if you could maybe start off by telling us a little bit about your academic journey. So how did you end up being where you are now in your career? And you might want to start from high school all the way up to your current role.
This is going to be a little bit of a long answer, but I'll try to not make it too long. So a long time ago, at the age of 15, I dropped out of high school, even though in the Netherlands, school is compulsory at that age due to personal and motivational issues. I had some problems growing up, I say. And after dropping out, I worked as a postal worker for a few years. And I always believed that I would end up becoming a bus driver without any diplomas. I didn't really have much confidence in my abilities, and I really wasn't sure what I was capable of. Eventually, I wanted to do more and thought I would try to make people's lives better. So I decided to enroll in secondary vocational education to become a social worker. So just to be clear, for those who are not from the Netherlands, this is 2 levels below university level. And I worked with elderly with dementia, people with Down syndrome, and I really tried to contribute to society. But I really felt that I wanted to be able to do more. So I moved up 1 level to higher vocational education to become a primary school teacher. I did that for a year and it went quite well. And again, I wanted to learn more. So I tried my hand at university and I started studying psychology at the Erasmus University Rotterdam. My initial idea was to become a clinical psychologist, but in the end, I fell in love with education all over again. So I obtained my master's in educational psychology and then did a PhD on this topic under the supervision of Sofie Loyens and Tamara van Gogh.
Seems, Vincent, that you're telling us that you were kind of demotivated or maybe some personal things happening. What changed this demotivation in you? This is very interesting for our audience, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a little bit, I had this innate drive of wanting to learn at some point and wanting to understand why people do what they do. And I thought that I would get that answer 2 levels below university, and I didn't. So I thought I want to do more. And it was really almost an innate drive. I think related, I should be really thankful to the teacher of my high school who kind of called me in sick, even though officially he wasn't. So I think he was doing something illegal even. Because I was supposed to go to school, but he noticed that, I was really unhappy at school and I was busy with all sorts of things, thinking about many things of life that at that age, normally you should not be busy with. I don't think there was one particular person, at least at that time, who inspired me to go back to school. Actually, it was whenever I would talk to an expert, they made it more difficult for me. Because if you go from 2 levels below university and move 1 level up, usually the people who try that end up failing. So they were telling me, are you sure you want to do that? And the same thing happened when I moved from higher vocational education to university. They were like, are you sure you want to do that? You don't want to take an extra year for training? But I had a drive and I was, I guess, pretty stubborn. Then I thought I'm just going to give it a go.
Yeah, very, very, very inspiring. So and then you pursued it. So it's not that you entered in the PhD. So what happened after that?
So I obtained my master's in educational psychology and did a PhD with Sofie Loyens and Tamara van Gogh because I was asked to become a student assistant with Tamara van Gogh, which kind of gave me some experience with research. I wasn't sure back then what I wanted to do and whether I really wanted to become a researcher. But I really liked working with Tamara on these projects, going to schools, recruiting participants, helping to design studies, materials, and think of good ways of examining a research question. So eventually she asked me whether I would want to become a PhD student and offered me a position. And I gave it a bit of thought and I happily agreed to do so. Yeah, and that went well. So I obtained my PhD and my master's also with honors, which is very rare in the Netherlands. Afterwards, my professor Tamara, she moved from Erasmus University to Utrecht University, and she could hire a postdoctoral researcher. She asked me to come with her in that sense, and I said yes. And I still work very happily at Utrecht University as an assistant professor. So I have 60% teaching and 40% research. I am responsible for coordinating several courses, and I'm really fortunate to supervise 3 wonderful PhD students. So I think it's, to close this up, it's rather ironic. My initial idea was to become a bus driver without any diplomas. And in the end, I acquired a lot of diplomas, including a PhD, the first in my family. But for a long time, I didn't have a driver's license. So the reverse thing happened. I do have one now, though, I should add.
So thanks, Vincent. So I just wondered if you could tell us about any mentors you've had that have helped you in your career. How have they maybe led you into your current research interests?
Yeah, there's 2 people who really immediately come to mind, and that's my PhD supervisors. So Professor Sofie Loyens and Tamara van Gogh. They really both taught me so much and gave me so many opportunities. I'm incredibly grateful and indebted to them. So as I said, Tamara was the first to hire me as a student assistant back then. And later, they both applied for funding from a Dutch company called Kennisnet and offered me the PhD position. This was a little bit special in that we had to ask for funding every year, and the maximum amount of duration was 3 years rather than 4 years, which would be normal. So there was quite a bit of pressure to have to work hard to secure the future in that sense, because otherwise I would be out of a PhD position. The project was on video learning. So both from the perspective of how one would ideally design videos to make sure that you learn as much as possible as the learner and be as motivated as possible, but also on what happens if you make a video yourself as the learner. So whether that would be a good instructional strategy. And actually still conduct most of my research on that topic. Yeah, both of them were really incredible role models. So I received what I would say is the example-based learning style of supervision. So they really showed me how to become a good researcher and really trained me, thinking along with every step of the research process, giving so much feedback. I got so many red documents, but in the end, that really helped me to become a much better researcher. They gave feedback on everything from conference proposals to presentations to emails and so forth. If I may give some examples of how they helped out. Tamara, for example, was actually the person who initially suggested that I would become active in early. She would introduce me to her network, for example, at the early conferences. And she's the reason I collaborate, for example, now with Andreas Lachner and Julian Rulle, because it was her idea to organize a symposium with them. Yes, Sofie was similarly incredible, also in a very personal way. So if I would work late in the evening, she would often also be there, and then she would bring me chocolates, or I got to pick up some chocolates because I had no time to eat dinner. Sometimes she would help me test participants. She even once drove me to a school early in the morning because I had no driver's license. Gave me sandwiches made by her mother with rhubarb jam. I was really dumb and I said that I didn't like rhubarb jam, which was of course an insult to her mother. So I still get teased with that one. So if you ask me, the most important predictor of your success as a researcher is the quality of your PhD supervisors. And I was lucky to have them. They're also very personalized people in the sense that they really took care of you as an individual. So it wasn't about hard work and output only. They created a very personal and friendly work environment. And I still work with Tamara a lot. She is my colleague at the Department of Education at Utrecht and also my manager. And we supervise PhD students together. Now I try to emulate their style with my own PhD students, so to say. To wrap up, I would say that there's definitely other people I also learned a lot from and that helped me become a better researcher. So Fred Paas, for example, during my master thesis and several collaborations afterwards. Alexander Renkel when I visited his lab in Freiburg. But I would say Sofie and Tamara are definitely the people who shaped my career and helped me become active in early the most. So I jokingly refer to them as my research mothers.
You've mentioned already then early, and this is the early podcast series. So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about how early has shaped your career. And I know you're involved in quite a few of the special interest groups, the SIG. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about them and how your involvement has shaped your career and your current research.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, indeed, Tamara was the person who first suggested that I would become active in early. She asked me to become the junior coordinator of 6-7. And to be honest, back then I didn't exactly know what early was all about so much and what you would do as a coordinator. And I was worried that it would distract from my PhD project. But I gave it some thought. I applied, and as is common, I was the only applicant, so I got the job. So I was a junior coordinator from 2013 to 2017. I would say this was incredibly educational. So I learned a lot about how science works, how conferences work, and because of my role in early, I got to collaborate with a lot of different people and communicate with a lot of different people that I would otherwise not be in contact with. So I helped organize the 6, 6, and 7 conference in Rotterdam, and actually many conferences after that, which was a good learning experience. Because of my junior coordinator role, I got to organize a special issue on video-based learning with Björn de Koning and Jean-Michel Bouchy in computers and human behavior. So I think it really offered a lot of opportunities for me. And then later in 2021, I was asked if I wanted to become the senior coordinator of 6-7, so the Technology Enhanced Learning and Instruction 6. And I did so because I would get to collaborate with Julian Rille, who was going to be the new coordinator of 6-6, Instructional Design, who we actually collaborate with a lot. So 6, and 7 are often organizing events together. And with Andreas Lachner, who was the current coordinator of 6-7 back then. Currently, I work a lot with Julia Desiron, and she's also very great to work with. And I will step down in 2025 as a coordinator.
Do you have to step down?
Yeah. So they are always 4-year periods. I'm not sure if I could change the rules and well, I could probably come back after a while, but it's time to give someone else the chance because I think this opportunity is really special. The 6, and 7 community is really special. The science is of incredible quality and it's also very personal, so the interactions are great. There's lots of jokes, lots of laughter. We have table tennis competitions, and it feels kind of like, this is going to sound super cheesy, but like an academic family that you see every year, and it's great to catch up again. So I will definitely keep attending the conferences and maybe in the future be a coordinator again. I think that for now it's good to give someone else that chance. Perhaps it's also good to note that aside from my involvement in 6-7, I was also a member of Early's EFG, so number 3, on the connection between cognitive load theory and self-regulated learning.
What would be an EFG for the non-expert audience?
So this is like a collaboration among experts. It's almost a research group in a way from people all over Europe and I think also beyond that focuses on a topic that is very relevant and contemporary and I think ideally also interdisciplinary. So this EFG brought together 20 or more experts actually on cognitive load theory and self-regulated learning. And as a group, we try to initiate a bridge between those two frameworks/approaches. To me, I think this was one of the most special experiences because it really brings everyone together to focus on one topic and try to solve a big problem in the field together and not in a way of competition where everyone does his or her own thing, but as a collaborative effort, which was very pleasant. And in my opinion, how science should be done much more often, that we should come together and tackle the big challenges as a unit rather than competing versus each other.
That's a very good way of seeing academia, Vincent. Thanks for that. So you're in a position that all the experience you're telling us, the different conferences and groups you're involved. How do you think the research trends in learning and instruction have changed in the last years?
I think there's a general shift towards better quality research and a focus of quality over quantity, which I think is really good. So it's not about small experiments and you try to publish as many of them as possible because slowly researchers are embracing open science principles like pre-registration, sharing data, but also conducting adequate power analyses and more focus on replications. So to give an example, this year I was the discussant at a symposium on generative learning strategies at our 6-7 conference in Tübingen. And there were 3 empirical studies in that session from the labs of Julian Rille and Andreas Lachner with sample sizes of 590, 308, and 208. a lot of process measures, and delayed tests 1 week and even 8 weeks later. Now, several of these were even conducted in actual classrooms. And to me, this is amazing to see because that leads to much more robust findings. Of course, these are incredibly effortful studies to run, and then you cannot publish as much. But I really think that this is an ongoing trend that hopefully will continue and that we could better inform theory and practice in this way. I would say within my technology enhanced learning and instruction field, there's just a general shift towards virtual and augmented reality and artificial intelligence. So we tend to go along with the new hypes, and these are the new hypes. And it's kind of fun to see that history repeats itself as every research question finds new life as new technologies emerge. For example, back in the day in my PhD, I examined whether the age and gender and perceived expertise of the instructor in the video might matter, so would influence learning and motivation. And now these studies will get repeated in virtual reality, for example. I hope that there will be a greater focus on advancing and using theory, but I think I've yet to see that really substantiate in the field. I think the shift towards artificial intelligence is very exciting because AI really offers very unique opportunities that were not there before AI. I think this will be the next big thing in learning from video, in learning by making videos. For example, can AI help the learner to make better quality explanations? Or can give feedback on the quality of the explanations? Because it's always in these strategies, generating good explanations is the way that you learn and remember on the long term. But students really struggle to generate good explanations, and maybe AI could have a role in that.
I wonder if there's, a particular publication you'd like to share with the audience today, and maybe explain why that particular publication is something that you wanted to share.
Actually, that there's quite many, and I don't mean that to say that in a boasting way, but that there's actually wonderful work being done. And I think a prime example of an article that I would love to highlight is the first paper of the early EFG on self-regulated learning and cognitive load. So it's a 2020 paper in Educational Psychology Review titled Synthesizing Cognitive Load and Self-Regulated Learning Theory, a theoretical framework and research agenda. So what this paper did is provide a theoretical framework on the interplay between aspects of cognitive load theory and self-regulated learning theory, and to describe an agenda for future research. So we as the EFG got together through many meetings and even 1 week live in Freiburg. And we worked on this framework as a collaborative unit. And publication is a result of that. So everyone in the EFG contributed to this publication, and it has 23 authors in total. So in my view, this is an ideal example of experts coming together and trying to solve a problem, or at least laying the foundational work for solving that problem. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the follow-up work that emerged from the EFG was inspired by this initial article. For example, there's a recent paper that emerged from the EFG, also in EDSci Review, titled Comparing Mental Effort, Difficulty, and Confidence Appraisals in Problem Solving, a metacognitive perspective, where we applied concepts and paradigms from self-regulated learning research to cognitive load theory to show that the idea that cognitive load appraisals are not biased at all is not true, and actually very much like self-regulated learning self-reports, cognitive load self-reports, so reported mental effort, reported perceived difficulty, are also biased and prone to misleading cues. I actually have two more, if I may.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm pretty proud of the review article in EDSci Review that I wrote together with Andreas Lachner, Tamara van Gogh, and Alexander Renkel, where we reviewed empirical literature on learning by teaching without interacting with the audience, which is basically what you do when you make a video as a learner for someone else. We discussed the evidence on the general effect, on the boundary conditions, and highlighted relevant directions for future research and recommendations for practice. And I think I would be a bad PhD supervisor if I didn't highlight my PhD students. My last publication, which is on the Vici project of Tamara van Gogh, which is a very prestigious project. So she acquired funding for this in the Netherlands that helps train students' self-regulated learning skills in the context of problem-solving tasks. So this has two PhD students, Florence Lucas and Jane Piepelenpot, and the article is by Jane. And she examined how to train students to accurately assess their own performance and to select a new task when they are self-regulated in their learning. This was published in Applied Cognitive Psychology. And she was predominantly interested in how to help students apply those principles that they learned if they are confronted with a new task database. So that is transfer. So what can students do regarding this training? How can we make this training effective to ensure that people are able to better select tasks and more accurately assess their own knowledge in a new task database? And I think it's a nice short paper that I'm actually very proud of that she wrote down very well.
Thank you. That's several, different research areas and very interesting papers and publications in high quality journal articles. So congrats on that, Vincent. I also know that you have been named productive researcher in some rankings, considering good quality journals. So it means sacrificing things, so time or holidays or being with the family. So how do you achieve this work-life balance?
Yeah, this is a very important topic that I think is often not really talked about. And we as researchers tend to not talk about it either, not even with our colleagues. I think if you want to do well as a researcher and really secure your future, which at the level of postdoc or assistant professor is very important, you need to do so many things and you need to do them all well. So it's teaching, research, grant writing, conference organization, article reviewing, PhD supervision, committees, management roles, editorial work, conferences. It's almost insane, the list of things we have to do.
And podcasts also.
But these are the most fun experiences, so I really appreciate it. So I indeed was highlighted as a highly productive researcher, and I hope in my previous answers I made clear that I should thank my PhD supervisors, but also my early collaborations for this, because without them, that would never be possible. And I definitely, during my PhD, worked incredibly hard, partly because my PhD project was so special in that it was only for 3 years and I had to reapply for funding every year. As a result, I published quite a lot of articles during my PhD and also the postdoc afterwards. I tried to apply for grants also, and that was also somewhat successful. For example, ironically, I found out that I got a Rubicon grant, which allowed me to work for a year at Alexander Renkel's lab in Freiburg. In the same week that I found out I was going to be a father, which posed quite a lot of challenges for let's say, a healthy work-life balance. So I had to travel back and forth quite a lot. The most extreme example of the sacrifice I had to make to be a good researcher, or at least a highly productive researcher, maybe those are not exactly the same, is that I wanted to apply for a VENI grant, which is a grant for a couple of years after your PhD that gets you funding. So you could basically buy out your teaching time and spend a lot of time on research. And it's very difficult to get. It's only for the top 1 or 2%. And I wanted it so bad that during the Christmas holiday, because the deadline was after the Christmas holiday, my wife and I bought a ticket to invite her sister over from Taiwan to travel here and to help take care of my daughter, who back then I think was about 2 years old or 1 year old. So I worked the entire Christmas holiday and only joined the dinner, barely saw my family. And in the end, I got to the final stage of that grant application, the interview process, but I failed. So I didn't get it. And I think after that experience, I really contemplated my life choices and wondered what I was doing. And I started working fewer hours. So I changed my contract from 5 days to 4 days a week. And I really tried to safeguard my free time. So I removed the email app from my phone. I removed the Teams app from my phone. I tried to only work during my working hours, and I don't check my email much on the evenings or the weekends, which is probably also why I was a little slow in responding to you every now and then. So I may not be as productive as I once was, and I may respond a little bit slower, but I'm definitely happier and I feel like a better partner, a better father, and a better friend.
Do you feel missing out sometimes?
I mean, sure, I don't have as much time to read all the latest publications as I would want, and probably sometimes I miss out on opportunities. But I really often ask myself, if I'm old and on my deathbed, what will I really care about when looking back at my life? And I predict that I will value time with family and also friends, and every now and then video games, perhaps, more over 1 or 2 or 3 more publications. So in that sense, I think I've become really a happier person. But it is still an ongoing struggle. Like right now, I have a course I need to coordinate, and it's just a lot of work. So to get the work done and do everything that I need to do within the available hours is really quite challenging. So I miss out, but I will gladly miss out if it means spending more time with my family.
Thank you, Vincent. That was really interesting. Thank you ever so much for sharing all your insights in the podcast today.
It was great. Thank you for having me. And if I may have a final statement, anyone who listens to this and is wondering whether or not to get active in the early community, I would recommend people to do so. I think it's a great learning opportunity. It will broaden your network and it will bring a lot of fun. I think this is a really special community. You'll talk about research, but also share beers and wines and whatnot.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Vincent.
Listeners, make sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and stay tuned for the exciting episodes we have coming your way. See you next time on the Early Research Stories podcast.